For decades, Graham Norton made everyone laugh, but not every guest made him smile. Behind the charm, there were interviews so awkward, so unbearable that even TV's smoothest host couldn't save them. And now, at 62, he's finally revealing the truth. In a rare confession, Norton names the 6 guests she couldn't stand. From drunken chaos Toffersy silences that brought his show to a halt. Who were they? You're about to find out. Number 1, Mark Wahlberg. To Graham Norton, hosting isn't just about celebrity chatter. It's about rhythm, timing, and control. For decades, he's made chaos look easy, turning awkward silences into laughter and nervous guests into viral gold. But there's one night he could never laugh about. That night was Mark Wahlberg. It was 2013, and Norton's iconic red sofa was packed with talent. Michael Fassbender, Sarah Silverman, and the Hollywood tough guy himself there to promote Broken City. At first, everything seemed fine. Wahlberg was charming, funny, and totally in control, but as Norton later told the Mirror, there was not a hint of it. And then about 20 minutes into the show, it caught up with him. Oh, it was bad. What caught up with him, of course, was the alcohol. Wahlberg wasn't just loose. He was gone. He began interrupting, talking over Sarah Silverman, derailing conversations. And at one point, an awe moment that made even the audience gasp, he climbed onto Graham Norton's lap, wrapping his arm around the host. Wahlberg slurred his way through jokes that made no sense. Norton smiled for the cameras, but his eyes said everything. Later at the 2025 Henley Literary Festival, Norton finally told the full story. If you ever see a drunk person on the show, he said, it's because they arrived drunk. We haven't made that happen. Mark Wahlberg was a weird one because when he arrived, he didn't seem drunk. And then 15 minutes in, whatever was in his system really took hold. And it was hell. Michael Fassbender tried to tell a story. Sarah Silverman tried to help. But as Norton recalled, no one could tell a story. A tone stage. Fassbender was finally getting through a great anecdote, and it hot. This one's going well. They looked over at Mark Wahlberg, and he was asleep. The audience laughed nervously that night, unsure whether to enjoy the spectacle or feel secondhand embarrassment. Online clips went viral. Half the internet calling it chaotic comedy gold, the other half labeling it painful to watch. When asked about it later, Wahlberg laughed it off. I'd had a few drinks before the show. He admitted I was just having fun. Maybe a little too much fun. He brushed it aside as a wild night, not realizing how deeply Ithad tested one of television's most patient hosts. For Norton, the experience was a turning point. The rare moment when even his professionalism count saved the show from descending into chaos. He never held a public grudge. But when asked years later to name his worst guest, he didn't hesitate. The famous one was Mark Wahlberg. He said simply, that one washel. A for the feud, it quietly fizzled rather than exploded. Wahlberg later sent word through producers they'd meant no disrespect, calling Norton a great guy and blaming jet lag and whiskey for fiasco. Norton, ever the diplomat, forgave but never forgot. Today, more than a decade later, their paths have crossed only briefly at industry events. Smiles are exchanged, but the warmth never returned. To this day, when fans ask Norton who his worst guest was, his answer is short, sharp, and unchanging. Mark Wahlberg. And trust me, once was enough. Number 2, Mickey Rourke. When it comes to difficult guests, Graham Norton has seen it all. The divas, the drunks, the ones who just wouldn't play along. But there's one interview he still describes with a weary sigh. Mickey Rourke. It was supposed to be a headline-grabbing appearance. Roar, the once rebellious heartthrob turned Oscar-nominated comeback story, was booked to bring grit and unpredictability to The Graham Norton Show. Instead, what unfolded that night was something Norton would later call a nightmare. From the moment Roar walked onto the red sofa, the energy shifted. Other guests smiled, chatted, leaned forward. Roar slouched back, sunglassing, a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels reportedly in hand. Mickey Rourke. He was just exhausting. Norton later told the New Zealand Herald. He wanted to smoke all the time. I'd turn away for a second, turn back, and he lit another cigarette. IT was so boring. You feel like a teacher taking children on a school trip, not a chat show host. Even for Norton, a man who could make a rock talk, the interview was brutal. Rourke's answers came in clipped, mumbled fragments. When asked about his film, Hefford vague one-liners or shrugs. When Norton turned other guests, Rourke reacted, staring off into space or fiddling with his lighter. What should have been witty and warm turned flat and uncomfortable. At one point, Norton was forced to fill long silences just to keep the audience from cringing. Behind the scenes, staff recall Rourke arriving late and visibly irritated, clutching his drink and insisting on smoking despite studio rules. It was the hostility. One producer said it was disinterest. He didn't want to be there. The broadcast was edited heavily Tozelvid some flow, but the tension was unmistakable. Viewers noticed, too. The charm was gone, replaced by a strange heavy air that even Norton's wit couldn't puncture. After the episode aired, Norton didn't hide his frustration. In interviews, he joked, but the sting was there. He was exhausting, he repeated. He just didn't want to play. You could feel the audience slipping away. Minute by minute, Rourke, for his part, never apologized and didn't seem to care. When asked later about his UK talk show appearances, he brushed them off as an incense for the tabloids, saying, "I didn't do the clown stuff. I'm not there to make people laugh." To him, Norton's show was part of the entertainment machine he'd long resented. Glossy, upbeat, and a world away from a bruised authenticity, Hep prided himself on. The tension between them never escalated into an outright feud, but it never thawed either. Norton quietly placed Rourke on his personal do not invite list, and more than a decade later, that hasn't changed. Number 3, Kevin Costner. For Graham Norton, great television depends on rhythm, that spark of humor and spontaneity that makes conversations come alive. He's handled divas, drunks, and chaos with grace. But when Kevin Costner sat on his red sofa, all that magic vanished. It wasn't a blow-up. It was worse. Silence. Costner, the stoic star of The Bodyguard and Dances with Wolves, met Norton's quick wit with blank stares and clipped replies. I asked him a question, Norton later told the Express, and he looks at me like, Jesus, do I have to talk to his man? He gives a half a wah. Answer. Then Helen Mirren asks him something and he lights up. Costner wasn't rude, just unreachable. Every joke died midair. His calm, serious tone clashed completely with the show's lively energy. Crew members recalled the tension. You could feel the audience slipping away. Norton later reflected, some people just aren't made for this format. They dawned to get it, and that's fine, but it can make for a very long show. Costner never fired back, but he hinted at why he hates talk shows. Sometimes it feels like you're not there to talk. You're there to perform. I'd rather just have a real conversation to Norton. That missed the point. Laughter was a connection. There was no public feud, no insults, just quiet mutual understanding. Norton never invited him back. When asked years later who his worst guest was, he didn't hesitate. Kevin Costner, lovely man, I'm sure, just not my kind of evening. Number 4, Robert Dyro. When Robert Dyro agreed to appear on the Graham Norton show, it sounded like he had dreamed booking, a Hollywood legend, an acting titan, a living embodiment of cinematic gravitas. But what should have been a career highlight interview for Graham Norton turned into one of the longest half hours of his life. From the moment Dyro took his seat on the red sofa, Norton sensed trouble. The audience buzzed with anticipation, waiting for the Oscar winner to crack a joke or drop a dazzling story from the sets of Taxi Driver or Goodfellas. Instead, what they got was silence, short, cautious answers, long pauses, often smile that never quite reach highs. Norton, the undisputed master of quick wit and warm conversation, found himself battling dead air. He tried everything, teasing questions, light banter, even gentle self-deprecation. Nothing worked. Dyro remained still, reserved, almost meditative. The chemistry that makes Norton's show sparkle simply never ignited. At one point, even Norton couldn't help but acknowledge the struggle, leaning toward his guest with a grin and saying, "'Tis hard work, Robert." The audience laughed, but it was nervous laughter, the kind that breaks tension, not celebrates it. Years later, Norton finally opened up about the ordeal at Cheltenham Literature Festival. His verdict was blunt but diplomatic. He's not a storyteller, Norton said. "He's not very verbal. He's a benign presence." He recounted how Daryl once began what sounded like a fascinating anecdote. "We were all leaning in," Norton said, "willing it to be amazing. Then he finally went, 'Why am I telling this?' Nobody had an answer. We cut IT. IT wasn't anger that lingered. It was exhaustion. For a host who thrives on rhythm and connection, Daryl's quiet intensity felt like hitting a wall. The audience expected charisma. They got contemplation. Norton respected the man's legacy. Butaz, he later joked, "Not everyone made for the movies is made for the couch." Daryl, true to form, never fired back. When asked about his reserved reputation in interviews, he simply shrugged. "I'm not a talker," he told The Guardian. "I like to listen." To him, a late-night talk show was a stage. It was aspect light he'd rather step out of. His discomfort wasn't personal. It was instinctive. He'd spent a lifetime expressing everything through characters, not conversation. There was no feud, no bitterness, just two men operating on different frequencies. That Norton's world runs on laughter, timing, and openness. Daryl's world is built on insolence, precision, and control. When those worlds collided, neither could bend far enough to meet in the middle. Number 5, Daryl Hannah. For Graham Norton, silence is the enemy. His entire craft, the lightning-fast wit, the infectious laughter, the perfect timing, depends on rhythm. Conversation is his art form. But on one unforgettable night, that rhythm died the moment Daryl Hannah walked onto a stage. Unlike the unruly or intoxicated guest Norton had handled in the past, Hannah wasn't chaotic. She was something far more difficult, absent. From the second she took her seat on their sofa, she seemed detached, answering questions with one-word replies, her gaze fixed somewhere far beyond the cameras. Norton, used to coaxing even the most reluctant stars into laughter, found himself sinking into an ocean of silence. "It was excruciating," he later admitted. "I'd ask something, anything, and she'd just stare or say yeah and stop. It felt like she'd been dragged there against her will." His charm, his fallback wit, even his ability to turn awkwardness into comedy, all failed him. Viewers described the energy as painfully still. The audience unsure whether to laugh or hold their breath. Behind the scenes, production staff later revealed that Hannah had arrived tense and withdrawn, speaking little before filming. It wasn't diva behavior. One crew member said, "She just didn't want to be there." It was like interviewing a ghost Norton. Ever professional, pushed on, smiling through long pauses, filling the silence with anecdotes, desperately trying to keep the show alive. You start thinking, is it me? Did I say something wrong? He confessed years later at a live Q&A. But no, it was just nothing. She gave you nothing. Hannah never publicly addressed the incident, though in later interviews she hinted at a discomfort with performative venture talk shows. "They're not really conversations," she told The Independent. "You're supposed to funny or charming on cue. That's never been me." To her, the awkwardness was defiance. It was authenticity. She wasn't there to play a part. She simply didn't want to pretend. For Norton, that reasoning didn't make the experience any easier. He's joked more than once that the Daryl Hannah interview aged him a decade. When asked about his most difficult guest, he'd always hesitate. "Oh, Daryl Hannah," he'll say, shaking his head with a knowing smile. Lovely actress. But that night, torture number 6, Harvey Weinstein. Of all the guests Tover sit on Graham Norton's famous red sofa, none left a darker impression than Harvey Weinstein. It wasn't the usual kind of disaster. No drunken chaos or awkward silences. It was something colder, heavier, and in hindsight, far more disturbing.